Welcome to the Emotional Mastery Podcast. Today, I have Magda Kay, who is an intimacy expert, Tantra teacher, conscious relating coach, author, and founder of the School of Intimacy. And I think this interview is so perfectly timed because, as you saw, we are just like, sex is always a conversation that I have on the podcast, but I recently just dove into a solo, just sort of like opening the conversation of sex because I think it's so powerful and something that honestly a lot of us don't talk enough about. A lot of the feedback I got was, people who are maybe in their 40s and exploring sexuality and having friends that don't necessarily have that conversation. So I think, again, it's just such a part of life and it's such a beautiful part of life. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. But I'm gonna just hand you the floor to just sort of introduce yourself, your story, and sort of how you got into this work because it's interesting and it's beautiful, and yeah, just what brought you to this work specifically.
This question always makes me laugh because let's be honest, when I was growing up, that's not what I was thinking that I would become. I wanted to be a dancer, then I wanted to be in marketing, maybe psychology, and here I am. So it wasn't planned. It's a little bit life takes you where you're meant to go. And as often is the case, the area of life where we struggle the most usually is also the area where we can discover our biggest gifts. And I find that probably you have it from your own story as well, is that the parts of my life where I needed to and still need to heal and look at, this is, one of the process is also to teach this. So I'm having these conversations, like you said, with more people, because through having these conversations, through guiding other people, I'm also still helping myself. So it's like an ongoing process. So how I ended up with all of this? Well, see, I come from a household that unfortunately didn't demonstrate what healthy love is. So there are a few pathologies, but most importantly, there was not a single example of a happy couple that I could be exposed to growing up. So I grew up extremely cynical towards love. I mean, I thought that love was fake. When I saw couples in love holding hands, I either thought they were pretending or I just thought it's really lame. And I stayed away from love. I stayed away from relationships for a really long time. I was also really scared that I am like my mom, and I so didn't want anyone to see this part of myself. So then I get into my first real relationship when I was 27. And of course, you know what it's like, your first love, you think it's going to last forever. And oh my God, no, it didn't. What a shocker. But what really, pulled us apart was the fact that I wasn't having orgasm. And in a way, because until then, I had like some random hookups. In fact, I would say that I only had sex when I was drunk. And so I never really had to face it. But here I am in a relationship. We're having sex often. And, back at that time, we didn't talk about it. It was a bit of like, we're pretending the issue is not there. And so we didn't know how to address it. We definitely didn't know what to do about it. But losing a relationship because I couldn't orgasm, it felt painful, but it also felt in some way embarrassing, because I feel that for women, this whole conversation about not being able to orgasm, it's quite shameful, I would say. Like, we feel ashamed to admit that I struggle to orgasm, where in most cases it's not a woman's fault, but yet we feel like I'm doing something wrong. So I had all of these, emotions come up, and I was going through so much pain during this breakup. This is when I got pulled into sexual practices, sexual healing. Like, I knew that I have to go into Tantra. I knew that I had to address any trauma that was in my body that was blocking my sexual expression. And so I was looking for it, a decade ago. That didn't exist. Now, when you go online and you put Tantra, you're going to find festivals and workshops and books and courses, but it wasn't the case back in the times. And so I really I was asking around until I finally found an ashram in India, then a school in Thailand. And I went really deep, but all the time it was just for myself. You could say selfishly, I just wanted to heal myself. And the more I was going into it, the more I felt the call that this is really what I am meant to do in this life, that these are the teachings that I'm meant to spread. Because, and I know you look at it this way as well. What really shocks me is that what our society understands sexuality to be, that's maybe 30% of what sexuality actually is. And so when I realized this massive gap in knowledge and experience, I was like, well, no wonder I never had an orgasm. Why would any woman have an orgasm if this is what sexuality is to us? And so I felt like it's really needed to spread the information. And here I am doing this full time as my job. So yeah, this is how I got here.
I love it. Had you been able to orgasm before that relationship?
So yes, but I'll tell you like this, a few things happen. First, my definition of an orgasm changed totally.
Mm.
So I'm going to share with you the metaphor that I use. So we look at an orgasm from a male perspective, which is a certain point. It's a peak of experience. In Tantra, we talk more about waves. It's an orgasmic wave. And so imagine like a surfer, right? You can always find a higher, a taller wave. You can always ride the wave longer or for a shorter time. So if it's not a point, if it's a wave, you can always go higher. You can always go deeper. So the experience can differ from time to time. So it's not 0-1 thing. It's not I had or I didn't have. It's how much was I orgasmic during this experience. And I think that that's what is extremely helpful. Now, the second thing that I say is this metaphor of a boiling water. So imagine you have a pot of cold water and you put it on a stove, and then you heat it up, and the water eventually starts boiling. Now, there is a moment when it's really boiling and you know for sure that the water is boiling. But can you say the point when it's boiling? When the first bubble comes up? The first 10 bubbles? Because it's a transition, it's a scale, it's not a point. And so from that perspective, I look more at how deep was I able to go in this experience? How orgasmic did I feel? So I look at this scale, I look at how orgasmic, how much I felt versus did I feel something or not. So that's how I look at an orgasm and how I like to define it. But I will tell you, until today, I am aware, I'm a Virgo, and apparently this is also like from what I was told by some really, really advanced Indian, like Vedic astrologer, is that with my profile, I really need to feel safe with a man to allow myself to orgasm. So it's not easy for me to feel fully welcome in his heart. So if there is any doubts in me about whether this relationship is safe, whether he truly loves me, then I do feel there is resistance and there are blockages. It's just hard for me to fully let go. So this is still true until today. But I've learned to ride this wave, and I can go into orgasmic waves even outside of sexuality, just through breath work. When I did Kamba, I went into like this half an hour long, weird orgasmic experience after Kambo. That's not meant to be pleasant at all. So I've definitely activated my body to feel on a much deeper level.
Yeah, it's so interesting that specific. So I'm a Taurus, so just earth sign, similarity in that way. But I do notice that piece where there's one partner that I had that I wasn't able to orgasm often, barely at all. It was about the 2-year relationship. And I think it was because I was trying so hard to feel seen and to feel safe and to feel wanted. I couldn't get there as hard as I tried. And then I was I was thinking about it too much. So I think, I know for women and men, it's very different how we get there. And I think women, need a lot more of the prep work and to feel mentally like safe and seen and all those things. So I definitely resonate with that with you in that. Is it, and I know I've heard statistics where it's like 80% of women actually can't or don't achieve orgasm during sex. Why do you think that is?
Well, I heard 30%. Yours is
okay.
Scary.
Maybe mine's outdated.
Yes, but I will tell you why. So, when I lived in a tantric community, so I was with men who had this deeper understanding of what women need. And I had, just to be clear, I had some incredible lovers, and they opened me. They were amazing. But I will also tell you about some lovers from that community. So, you could say the conscious tantric men. And we had good sex life. I really enjoyed it. But I asked at some point for more sensuality. I was like, listen, I'm really enjoying what we're doing, but I also need sometimes to slow down, be more sensual, softer. And for example, the response would be, yeah, I'm not into this. Or you have no idea how many comments I get under my YouTube videos, basically saying, who has time for this? And so a woman's body is different. Yes, we kind of understand she needs foreplay, but what foreplay is for a man and a woman, it's very different. I always say oral sex is not foreplay. Oral sex is sex. It may be foreplay for a man, it's not for a woman. We need things before. And so if we nonstop keep hearing in some way from the society that we're asking for too much, we're too needy, right? We keep hearing that we are too needy just because we need some emotional safety from our partner. So we've been conditioned to suppress our needs for emotional connection, for intimacy, for sexuality. So why would women orgasm? Like if we're not given what we need? And unfortunately, for so long, I mean, female orgasm is not needed for a man to have an orgasm. It's not needed for a child to be born. For so long, like no one cared whether a woman even wanted it or enjoyed it. We're honestly just changing this narrative only now, that actually her pleasure also matters. But I have so many, because I work a lot with men, I have so many men follow me, and yet they still go into the story. Oh, I don't have time for this. Oh, it's too much hassle, too much work. So even if my man specifically doesn't tell me this, if I hear other men say this, of course I'm going to shut down. And from the place of contraction, we cannot orgasm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that it takes about 45 minutes to really get a woman ready. And I've repeated that to like some men, and that's exactly the same response. It was like, whoa, that's a long time, or that's too long, or I don't have time for that. And it's like, I feel like, yeah, I don't know. I guess the way societally we view sex is more of like a business. It's like a transaction, right? Like we get in, we get out, we do our thing, and we reach this peak, right? This set standard of what we're supposed to do, and then it's sort of over with. And I, again, being a Taurus sun, like I'm all about the senses. I love sensuality. I love intimacy. I love connection, and I think in the past too, I've definitely confused sex with intimacy. And I think that's something that can happen a lot, where I feel like I'm getting intimacy from sex, but it's not the same thing. I would love if you wanted to go into that a little bit, but how do we sort of reframe this for men, where we are getting, as a woman, what we need in our body to reach orgasm? Because I do also feel like a lot of men sort of feel like failures if they can't help a woman achieve orgasm, but yet they're not willing to put in the time that it takes to get there.
Yeah, I will say there's a lot of hypocrisy, unfortunately, and we are coming out of generations where it was all about men, right? Sex was purely male focused. So of course it will take some time to transition to the reality in which, we have different needs, and your needs are not the same as her needs. Now, I'll say this for men, please, 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 please put your ego aside. And the most important thing is just ask her. So many men assume, and I hear from, again, so many men, oh, I know what women want. Because it's we define masculinity through one of those things is like, can you please a woman? So, but this is like a competition between men, because women don't really define it, through the same lens. But like men kind of compete. Oh, I met her come this many times. And even today I saw a video where a woman was saying, nah, look, most of those times you guys don't realize they fake it. And the guy said, oh, who cares? Right? And you're like, wow, I mean, please do care.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot of work on men's side. Listen, this is not about you. Okay? Men, don't make it about you. It's about her and about what she needs. And even if all the women you've ever been with enjoyed something specific, it doesn't mean that your current partner will too. Ask her. Don't assume you know better. Like, what is this attitude that I know better what you need and what you want? Just ask her. And if she doesn't know, then go on exploration. Okay, let's try this, let's try that. And this will invite her to actually start taking responsibility for her body and her pleasure, because women really outsource it, and that's on us. We shouldn't. But I will also say to men, like, I understand that when a man hears like 40 minutes, all they think is like, there's no way I can stay hard for so long. So I think a lot of men kind of, saying, oh, who has time for this? It comes out of feeling inadequate or insecure about their performance. So keep in mind that it doesn't have to be you inside of her for 40 minutes. You have toes, you have fingers, you have your tongue. There's a lot of the other things you can do. It's about her being stimulated for that amount of time. So you can be giving her a massage, etc. So this is why I think of foreplay as something that doesn't necessarily include genitals just yet, because then you're keeping your energy lower. You're warming her up. You're giving her everything that she needs. And then when it comes to penetration, if you can last, like, let's just assume it's 10 minutes, maybe for some men this is long, but you'll be able to last inside of her as long as she needs you to if you do things outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, if any man goes to the gym, you don't just go and suddenly squat 100 kilos, right? You gotta warm up. You don't go straight for the thing. And it's the same here. So pace your energy. And honestly, if I ever hear a man say, I don't have time for 40 minutes, you do have time for 40 minutes to watch football games.
Mm-hmm.
You do have 40 minutes to, play some games, go drinking with your buddies, or go to the gym. It's like, this is the matter of priorities. And I would say to every man, if you really find yourself saying, oh, I don't have time, I would honestly ask you to question, to what degree do you actually care about your partner? Because if I know that my partner needs something to be happy and fulfilled, I wouldn't, like, I don't know, if, for example, if my partner like loves when we, I don't know, play Scrabble together, I would never say, oh, I don't have time for this. It's too much. It's like, I want to do things that make you happy.
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't you want to do something that makes your woman happy? Because if that's the case, then there's a deeper issue. Maybe you don't actually want to be in this relationship, and then maybe this is something to address.
Yeah. Well, and I think even when you describe foreplay in that way, it can even be simple as like starting at dinner and like raising her hand, or just, you know what I mean, cuddling on the couch, or like you said, massaging and things like that. Like, doesn't even have to be so much like in the bedroom, and even from like an astrological perspective, right? Like Venus is the planet of love, right? So like for me, I have Venus in Gemini. So for me, mental stimulation really excites me. So it's like, I think everybody is a little bit different in that way of like what turns them on or what gets them ready. But yeah, I think it's reframing that it doesn't have to be, all that time just like in the bed, like on her.
In
Like
fact,
it can
well,
be.
so it's so true what you're saying, and this is one of the things I try to teach to men as well.
Mhm.
So going back to the metaphor of the boiling water, right? If this pot of water is really cold, it's going to take a long time for it to boil. But if your water is warm or already simmering, it's going to be pretty fast. So for men operate differently. You can be focused on the work and then suddenly now you're focused on sex. Women don't work like this. If you want us to be ready for sex, we have to be thinking about sex throughout the day.
Mm.
It has to be always in our mind. In other words, we got to keep the water warm. So I get it that it may not be like instinctual for men. Then put some reminders in your calendar that throughout the day you send her like a nude, like a spicy message, whatever it is. Like send her something that makes her think about sex, like build the anticipation. And then when you're home, you don't have to necessarily spend an hour. You can spend half an hour. And then maybe this is the time you do have if you prepare her throughout the day.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. I love the build and the anticipation and like knowing, and thinking about it. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful way to like do it. It's not, all in the moment. If we're in, like, let's say we're in established relationships, we've been together for a while, these issues are happening, maybe somebody's not orgasming, maybe we're just that idea of like, I don't have the time. How can we like in those, because I think it's different when we're starting a new relationship and coming from, beginning it with communication and, in that way. How do we add in these little things in established relationships, or sort of revamp our sex life?
So I will say that if you've been together for a long time and you never talked about sex, it may be very difficult because how do you bring it up? How do you bring it up? Especially that what you want to bring up is criticism, really.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say that either getting a coach or going for some maybe tantric festivals, retreats, and workshops can be really helpful because none of the partners has to bring anything up. It's the teacher, it's the facilitator that does it for you. You're just receiving. So I think this can help couples ease into it and just sort of make the whole conversation a bit more natural and comfortable because someone is guiding you through that. Now, if it is something you do feel comfortable talking about, or once you are, I think the most important thing is to bring playfulness back into your sex life because a few things happen. First, we take sex way too seriously. If you watch any like erotic movie or anything like, when someone is seducing someone, it's like you're perfect. perfect makeup, everything is perfect. Instead, when I'm on a date and I eat something, most likely I'm going to spill something on my dress, right? And then and I think we need to make more space for not being perfect, for laughing, for doing something silly. Like, even if you think about this, like, how often do you fart during sex, right? Like things like this, things like this happen, and we have to be able to deal with this, to manage this. So if you can bring playfulness in, I think this is the most important thing. The second thing that happens is that couples become too much of a machine, running the households, taking care of responsibilities. It's too much of that. And then on top of this, if you live together, now I don't know about you, but before we got on this call, I was wearing my sweats. I don't really look sexy when I'm at home, right? My hair is up in a ponytail because that's the most comfortable. And I cannot even count how many times you wear like clothes that have some stains. Who cares? Because you're at home. And so this is how your partner sees you most of the time. There's nothing sexy about that. Plus, we know being together kills polarity. All of this adds up. So I think it's a great idea for couples to pick one evening a week. And this is your sacred time as a couple, and get out of the house. If you live together, get out of the house, meaning you go on a date, you go to a restaurant. If you can, rent a hotel room, especially if you have kids, because the moment you're home, you go back into the roles of a mother and father and flatmates and people who have to clean the dishes and do the dirty laundry. So being outside of the house helps to keep this energy alive. So that's once a week. And then once a year, go away on a trip, a romantic holiday. But changing the environment is so important. It's one of the tips for productivity for business people. Change the environment, which will allow you to think differently. This is why people, if you work from the same place and you're stuck, go and work from somewhere else. It's the same here. The brain, as long as you're inside of your house, there's all of these cues that are telling you you're just flatmates, you're just parents. So you need to change the cues to remind yourself, wait, we're lovers. And people, I think, sometimes really struggle to change patterns. And all you need to do is just change your environment, get out of the house. And everything will kind of magically change because the cues will change.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I do think it is difficult once you get into those patterns and routines, right? To then like switch things up. But it is so powerful. And yeah, just rewiring your brain in that way brings that back in. I have going back to sort of like Tantra, specifically, like what was it about that called you? And then like what misconceptions do we even have about Tantra? Because I think it's just like a word that we hear a lot and maybe really don't even know, because I know it is so much more than sex, but we think only like sex when we think of Tantra.
To be fair, I think back in the days when I first heard the word Tantra, it was still this mystical, mysterious thing. And I just thought of like, oh, if people like, when someone said, oh, I practice Tantra, I was like, oh, she must be like a sex goddess. And I think a lot of it was still that when I first wanted to get into this. So I don't think I had the best understanding of Tantra. Mm-hmm. And especially at that time, I heard some stories about like, open relationships, which again, now it's a pretty common conversation we're having. Like 13 years ago, it was not. Mm. And I heard about this thing called a yoni massage, right? Which is the massage of the genitals. And I just remember thinking like, what? What? A stranger would put his fingers inside of me. What is this? But I heard all of these kind of weird practices. And then slowly I was opening up and becoming more curious. So I definitely had a limited understanding of Tantra. But I did think Tantra was about sexual healing. And when I was looking for Tantra, I was specifically looking for the sexual aspect of it. Mm-hmm. And it's only when I went to India and I started studying more the spiritual aspect of Tantra, this is when I truly understood what it's about. But at the same time, I think you cannot fully understand the sexual aspects of Tantra if you're just limiting your understanding of Tantra to sex. Because, I spoke before about these orgasmic waves. To get there, you have to do healing on your body. You have to open your energy channels and your chakras. You have to clear the blockages. You have to do breath work and yoga and a lot of other practices. Unless you do that, you're not going to have tantric sex. It may be better sex, it may be more conscious sex, but not tantric sex. Tantric sex allows us experiences that feel as if you took drugs. Like imagine having sex while being on drugs. This is what Tantra is, but you just don't take anything because your body is naturally open and used to producing all of these beautiful chemicals that give you this feeling of ecstasy without taking ecstasy. So it is a spiritual practice. And sexuality has always been part of Tantra. It's absolutely not the whole story. But to be fair, I don't have anything against people limiting Tantra to sex. And the reason why is because, you know, our generation, or really our society, we're so wounded sexually and we really need the healing. And I don't think every human being is interested in enlightenment, which you can totally achieve through Tantra. That's why it exists. It's a spiritual path. But I think most people are not looking for that. And through sexuality, you get to really connect to yourself, connect to life, like cultivate that sense of oneness that in a way enlightenment gives you. It's just not everyone wants to go so deep, but you can still experience moments of oneness during tantric sex. And so for me, that's okay that people think of Tantra just in that aspect. However, what I don't align with is that these days Tantra often is considered a synonym to polyamory and sex parties. And you can be celibate and be tantric. You can be a virgin and be tantric. You can totally be monogamous and be tantric. So this is one aspect where I think it went too far, because I think people think, oh, Tantra, you must be so sexually promiscuous. And that's not the case. A lot of people use Tantra as an excuse to be promiscuous, absolutely. But you can have any relationship to sexuality and still be tantric.
Can one partner in a relationship be practicing Tantra, you know, meditations, things like that, and have that experience without the other partner being interested in it?
To be fair, unfortunately, this is the case for most couples. Like usually one partner wants to explore sexuality, is more curious, has more of a growth mindset and expansion mindset, and the other doesn't. I'll tell you honestly, like with anything, if you start growing apart because one person really wants those deeper experiences and the other doesn't, this may be, you know, a reason for a very serious conversation. Like, are we really meant to be together? Because it shows that you guys value things very differently and that your approach to sex is very different. And I do believe that sex is the glue of a romantic relationship. So I would say that, you know, not everyone is sexually compatible, but at least having values and approach to sex that is aligned, I think that's very important. Otherwise, you can just be great friends, you know? So what would usually happen if one person starts practicing this, the other person, if they're not resistant, if they're not skeptical, if they're not mocking what you're doing, but they're just neutral, because like, you know, it's not really my thing, but let's see. And so sometimes their body can passively follow. So these are one of the actually techniques in Tantra. So you would go with an advanced lover and you're just going for the experience, and his or her body is doing some magic and your body simply copies this. So it's like kind of through passive interaction, your body opens to a deeper level of those experiences as well. So this can totally happen with couples. So even if just you are into this and your partner isn't, as long as they remain open, they can actually start experiencing something more. And if you are like, you know, when you're having these tantric experiences, these ecstatic states, I know from men, at least the way they described it, so I would assume it's the other way as well. For men, they said it feels like they just basically like they put their cock into an electrical socket. It's just like, whoa, it's so powerful. They can feel her energy. And so a woman can also feel his energy inside of her. So if you're with a partner who is practicing, like you will feel this, and this can open us up to be more curious and open to practice ourselves.
And when you talk about, you know, meditation and breath work and things like that, is there any like specific tool, or if anyone's listening and sort of is just interested in beginning that journey, that we can take to sort of get to this practice?
So basically anything you'll do will be helpful. Any type of yoga, but a conscious yoga, not just a physical exercise. I'm talking about yoga where you close your eyes, you feel into your body, you actually expand your chakras, like where it's focused on feeling the energy. So any form of yoga like this will be helpful. Any form of breath practice, anything you'll be doing, any form of healing, any work with energy is opening your body. All of these practices, they're tantric in nature. But most specifically, if you want something more concrete practice, there are two things I would recommend. The first one is you breathe through the mouth. So when we meditate, we breathe through the nose because this stills and centers our energy, right? It's about being still. Now in Tantra, we want the opposite. We want to activate the energy. And so what we do is you breathe through the mouth and you take deep breaths. But I mean deep breaths. I don't mean just kind of gently opening the mouth and then a little bit of air comes in and out. That's not that. You're meant to be feeling like you're hyperventilating. Don't push it because, we got to build our capacity to hold so much breath and so much energy. But that's how you want to breathe. And the second one is slow down. So especially when we're having sex, because so much of it is about contracting the body. When we build up into an orgasm, so definitely for men, and for women, the clitoral orgasm, it's actually very similar to ejaculation in the sensations in the body. It's like, tense, 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 and then it's this release of the tension. So here I'm asking you to do the exact opposite. Instead of building the tension in the body, relax the body. Very often, the breath will come very fast and shallow, and we can even hold the breath because it intensifies the sensations. Relax the breath. Longer inhale, longer exhale. And at first, you may be like, I hate Magda for this advice, because you may notice that, you're building up to an orgasm and then you lost it, because you need to rewire your body to learn a different type of an orgasm that doesn't come from tension, but comes from relaxation. But a side note, a full body, multiple or energy orgasm, they're only possible from the place of relaxation. So it's a different type of an experience, but it's nice to be able to have both. Because when you relax your body, this is when the energy can move through the whole body and you end up shaking. And it's just like, this is this proper ecstatic state, the blissful state, but you have to relax. So breathe through the mouth and relax.
Yeah, there are times when I've done like breath work or yoga, and even like afterwards or during, I almost feel that sexual energy like coming on, basically like getting turned on like during the practice. And I'm just, as you're describing that, I'm wondering if it's maybe the way I was breathing or something that like activated it. But it's really interesting how that energy can really be released during those certain practices.
Love. So I don't have it now because I'm not as open as I used to be. I used to practice a few hours a day. I don't. It's just a choice of how I want to live my life. So I'm not as open as I used to be. But in times when I was, I remember when I would go to the gym, and I love training. And there's this specific stretch I would do for my quads. And the moment I would do this at the end of the training, I felt this incredible energy in my root chakra. And I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And I'm like, I'm in the gym. And I was like, what's happening? Well, here is what's happening. When you do squats or like deadlifts or anything on the lower body, you're activating your root chakra, which is actually the source of sexuality. The second chakra is pleasure and romance. But this animalistic instinct to fuck, that's your root chakra. And so when you do things that strengthen the root chakra, automatically you're activating this energy. And for both of us being earthy signs, like that's our predominant chakra, right? Because earth is the root. So for us, it will be easier to activate this. So then, I was doing all of this. And then because at the end, your muscles are tired. So you give in. There's this incredible sense of relaxation because your muscles are tired. And so I was feeling, it's not that I was feeling aroused. I could feel that if I allowed myself to go with it, I would go into waves of orgasm, but I was in the gym, so I didn't. But that's the whole point. It's when you activate your energy, because sexual energy is your life force energy. It's a type of energy. Your kundalini is your sexual energy. So anytime you activate your energy, it can go like be expressed through sexuality. So anytime you work with energy, it can go in that direction, into that expression. And that's how it's meant to be.
How important or how much does like self-pleasure masturbation play for a woman in getting to that place of relaxation? Or, I mean, I think it's important just to know your body, but does it play in at all to like tantric practices and breath work and things?
I'll tell you something. This may be a bit of like a shock for people, but I don't love self-pleasure.
Mm.
It's a very different experience for me being on my own than being with a partner.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certain, I think, experiences that just doesn't feel the same.
Yeah.
I love the male body. I love the flesh. And I really like penetration, but again, I'm an earthy woman. So there will be certain things that just for my body work more than maybe for someone else who's not earthy in their expression of sexuality. But still, taking time to be with yourself, in my opinion, is essential. It doesn't necessarily even have to be about getting to know your body, because it does feel differently when I touch myself or when someone else touches me. For me, it's more about nurturing this deep, intimate relationship to self. It's like, if I don't want to touch myself, why would anyone want to touch me?
Mm-hmm.
If I don't think my genitals are beautiful, then why would anyone think that? So for me, self-pleasure is more about, it's a me time, this date with myself, where I get to hold myself and love myself physically. So that's how I look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily like a practice for like relaxation or tantric tools, at least not for me. I know a lot of women really like it and it really works for them, and they can go like an hour or 2 hours of self-pleasure. Again, I think it's individual, but I still think it's really important for women to have this time with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I will also add, we're animals, and there are times, especially when we ovulate, when we just have this animalistic desire to practically like jerk off, you could say.
Mm-hmm.
So go for it.
Yeah.
Like I have phases, and like my best friend, she's also very, very sexual. So sometimes when we're in this phase of being very horny, it's like, oh, I may need to masturbate a few times a day. That's normal. If your body needs it, just go and enjoy. So for me, it's a bit of a spectrum of experiences, but regardless, I would say it's a part of self-love practice, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I've spoken to a few women that have never or can't orgasm during sex, and I asked them if they do it on their own, and a few of them have say they don't even pleasure themselves, so they don't masturbate. And so I was just like wondering that. I mean, I feel like if you then learn yourself and know how to get there yourself, then it would benefit you during sex.
So for me, for example, if I think of self-pleasure for myself, I don't have the ability to penetrate myself the way my partner would.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's a bit difficult to open myself from that perspective. And I don't love toys.
Mm-hmm.
Crystal wants, it's a different story. I feel like they're alive, they have energy, but I just don't like toys because it's like dead substance. So it doesn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also this case when you're with someone, especially if you love someone, feeling their body inside of you, like I just feel the energy right away. So there's this element which I don't get to have on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And if I think of different ways that can make me calm on my own, it's not always practical to do it with a man. It's almost like I have a different experience with a partner than I have on my own.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I feel like sometimes almost partners can get like sort of jealous of that. Like when you're in a relationship, right, and there's a partner that is continuing to masturbate, like I feel like sometimes there can be like a jealousy thing. And I'm just curious, is that more so because maybe like an ego thing of like, I'm not doing it, or you're doing it yourself, or you don't need me, or something like that?
To be fair, just personally speaking, I don't understand why would anyone get offended. I mean, like, you own your sexuality. I don't own your sexuality. I think it's already pretty incredible that if you are in a monogamous relationship that we choose, we will only express our sexuality with each other. But my sexuality is mine, not my partner's. It doesn't belong to him or her. It belongs to me. And I choose maybe to keep it for you, right? If we want to have a monogamous relationship, but I'm like, I still am a sexual being. And for me, this is one of the ways to keep the sexuality alive in our bodies, so that we don't, like, we're not fully dependent. Like, well, like I say, I argued with my partner, or they're not available, so now there's no sex for 2 weeks. Like, I'm not limited to my partner's body.
Yeah.
There is all of the things I can do myself. So for me, it's natural, it's normal. And in fact, I would say, please do. I'm not going to say you should, but very close to that.
Yeah. You talk about, and I really relate to that, of just like they're a partner and flesh, and just the connection that's had in that way. Obviously, doing it solo can't really match that. I think there's a lot of, the smells and the tastes and all these different things that come into play with actual sex than self-pleasure. But when we're talking about like sex and intimacy, can you get a little bit just into like the differences and, how we can achieve both?
Yeah, so I like you said this before, that intimacy and sex is not the same. So I
Mhm.
always say you can have intimacy without sex and you can have sex without intimacy. And unfortunately, a lot of us do.
Mhm.
So for me, intimacy, it's not a what, it's a how. So it would be almost, how do you have sex? But not just sex, it's how do you live? So my definition of intimacy is it's the depth of your experience of life. So how deeply do you feel that you are alive? And so that's for everything. That's not just sex. That's everything in life. How do you live your life? What is the depth of your life? And so with sex, well, I have nothing against quickies, but in order to feel the depth, we need to pause, to go deep. So it happens in the present moments. I have to slow down. And there are moments when we can't slow down, we can't be present. Gonna make a little side note here. Remember years ago when I first got into all these spiritual practices, and my friend asked me, Magda, so are you present all the time? And I said, no. Imagine me driving a car. If I was just in the present moment, I'm gonna, cause an accident. Because I have to think of what is possible, of what could happen. I have to be focused on the external. So life has different demands. We're not meant to always be present and deep. But most of us have lost the ability to go deep when there is an opportunity for that. That's the problem. It's about us being able to switch. I can be, if you want to say masculine, feminine, outward, inward, but it's about being able to move between the two, which most of us, we've lost that ability. And so the depth during sex is about, yes, slowing down. You can go for like intense, thrusting, but then take a moment to slow down and observe the sensations in your body. And if you want to have a quickie, but afterwards, just lie down for a moment, your eyes closed, don't interact with your partner, be next to each other, close your eyes and feel your body. Actually, pay attention to what just happened. It's a bit like, I don't know if you've done it, I've done it tons of times, and I still do. I know I shouldn't, but you know the difference. Oh, we're having some.
Zoom got interesting.
I don't know how to turn this off. I don't know why. My Zoom started doing this, and yeah, we got some visual special effects here. So, when you eat something, and imagine you're eating and watching a movie versus you're just eating and fully focused on your food.
Mm-hmm.
It happens that you're eating, you're watching something, and you're like, oh, wow, I just finished. Because your brain didn't register. So you don't feel full. You still feel hungry, even though the food is in your belly. But because the brain was focused on something else, it didn't register the experience. That's true for everything. So if we rush, like, back to the conversation we had at the beginning, men saying, oh, I don't have half an hour for sex. That means you never go deep.
Mm-hmm.
If you say, I never have time for this, great, but then you never go deep.
Mm-hmm.
You never actually experience true intimacy, because for that, you need to pause. Don't do, but just be. So adding those moments of pauses during or after lovemaking, close your eyes and just feel your body. What just happened?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've discovered that I am a very deep person and I love depth in all areas. And yeah, I've been in relationships where sex has been very deep, but there's been no depth outside of it. Right. And so then it becomes this thing where that's all that we have. Right. And so I think it's important to obviously have that balance between the depth, both inside and out of the bedroom.
Yes.
Right. So you're not just like in a situation where maybe you want a commitment, but it's not happening, but you're continuing to show up for the depth that you're found, intimacy that's found within sex. But it is a beautiful thing. And I think just accepting that about myself just really helped. That's what I crave. That's what I'm always seeking. Like I've never really been fulfilled with, not quickies, but like one-offs, because I think that
Yes.
there's a depth that I can't necessarily reach with somebody when it's just a one-time thing. And not to say that you can't have depth there, but just for me personally. But yeah, it's a
I'm fully
beautiful
with
thing.
you on this one. I
Yeah.
think especially having experience, and I'm just going to say tantric lovemaking if you
Mm.
want, but like this deeper expression of sex. And then I had one lover who wasn't trained in these practices. And like, oh my God, just sex wasn't good.
Mm.
And very often when I tell people this, and I know from other of my friends, it's the same. When you say like, oh my God, I finally like, my sex life is so amazing now. And they say like, yeah, but my sex life is good. It's like, no, you don't understand. Because unless you try deeper sex, you don't understand what you're missing because you never had the experience. So I didn't know how unfulfilling the old type of sex was until I started having deep sex. And once you have this, and like it just like, the level of satisfaction and fulfillment you get from this depth, you're like, I don't want to go back.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to go back. I need the depth. It's when you realize what's really possible. You realize what your body truly needs. And especially for women. And that takes me back to the question we had before. Why so many women don't orgasm? Because we need that level of depth. We need to go that deep to be able to. And most men don't understand it. Most women don't understand it. Most people have never even gotten close to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel very fortunate right now to have a partner that the depth is there, right? I mean, there's like so much. And I think because the conversation began from the beginning of being curious and open, and obviously, and because it's in all areas of the relationship, it's not just there. But obviously that's not every single person, right? And I think as you progress and, if you're dating, I think I don't want to say easier, but I think starting from the beginning, right? In that perspective with that knowledge and approaching a relationship in that way makes it a little bit more easier to sort of establish that baseline. But
look, honestly, I think so too. I think, sometimes we want to change patterns of behavior, and it's much easier to start it from zero. Let's say if I want to be better at work, it's much easier to change jobs and start well than to try get better in the previous jobs. I think this is true. This is true. And fortunate or not fortunate, it depends where every person is in their life at the moment. It's not to say it's not possible, but I would say to all the single people, because I'm very often asked, I'm single, can I practice Tantra? Yes, absolutely. Like, and again, even if you're celibate, there's so much you can practice, because then you're starting the relationship from a very different place, very different starting point, like you just had.
Yeah. It's very cool. I would love to talk about your book and dive into that a little bit. No More Faking It. What is the book about? And I know you talk about these power centers within there.
Yes.
If you want to, dive into that a little bit.
So, if I look at my life, I probably, as everyone, I've made some stupid mistakes, which of course I've learned from, but still there were stupid mistakes. And so, through trial and error, I came to conclusion that we have these different voices inside of us. And, when you go into spirituality, they tell you that just, follow your heart. When you go to Tantra, you hear that, oh, ask your genitals, ask your sex center, because it's so, it will give you guidance and all of this. And I'm like, instead of just looking whether it's this system or that system, the solution usually is about combining them all. Instead of like, I see there's so much competition in spirituality, which is kind of crazy. So I have developed my own system of working with these 4 power centers, these 4 voices inside of me, which represent, you could say, our 4 core needs, like these kind of pillars of things we need in life, or you could say kind of 4 parts of who we are. And so these 4 centers are your head, your heart, your gut, and your pussy or your cock. The book, by the way, is for women, so I talk about the pussy, but men absolutely have the 4th center as well. Now, the whole point here is this. Each of these centers, it wants something different. So the head wants you to set the goals and go for them, achieve success, etc. Great, very helpful. But the downside of it is that you can get burnout. I don't know about you, I have. Not fun. Now, your heart, it's all about love and connection. And again, of course, we need love and connection. But there is a shadow here as well. The heart can be very naive. And it's all about, but she's so loving, he's so good, and it makes us stay, for example, in toxic relationships because we think that love will conquer all, and it doesn't. Love is important, but it's not all. Then you have your gut, which wants your safety and security, again, very important, but it can keep you away from learning, And then finally, the pussy or the cock, it's about pleasure, not just sexual. And again, this is so needed. This is where I think Tantra really comes in, because so many of us keep forgetting to just enjoy life, right? We're just like, because so many of us live from the head. It's all about the goals and you don't enjoy the process. But the downside of it is that our sex center loves instant gratification and it's very spoiled. Everything is now, and it doesn't think about consequences. So if you, for example, ever met, let's say if I met a guy and I knew he had a girlfriend, but I was like, oh, but I really want him. That's the sex center. The pussy would be like, go for it. Who cares? So maybe even when I tell you about these centers, you guys can kind of feel like, oh yeah, okay, this is what I've been doing. Most people at any given time of your life, you'll see that one of these centers took over and it's bossing you around. So inside the book, I actually have a quiz for people to find out which of the centers is controlling your life right now. And this is the starting point, because what happens with people is that we have this internal fight between these centers. And so you will always feel torn and you'll always end up doing things that are going to be rather, are going to have painful consequences for you. And so the test allows you to understand first which center controls you, then why the center is controlling you, because it shows unmet needs that you need to look at, and then how to incorporate the other three so you can feel balanced. Now, this is the system that can be used in any area of life. I had one of my clients, she actually talked to her power centers to know if she should merge her company with another one. So that's pretty, I think, incredible to make such big business decisions. But essential, especially for women, requires us to perfectly honor our boundaries and needs as intimacy and sex. So this is why the book is for women, because it's about giving women a tool to really feel empowered to say yes or to say no in sex. Own your yes and own your no, because so many women don't.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of women try to please, right? And be the people pleaser. And yeah, I read a quote in A Return to Eros. I don't know if you've read that book, Mark Gaffney.
No.
But it's all about, sexuality and how Eros isn't everything, right? Like sort of like Tantra, right? It's not just sex, it's everything. But he said, he said arousal is not consent and regret is not rape. And I thought it was just such a beautiful thing to be able to it reminded me of that sort of like own your yes and own your no, right? Just because you're aroused doesn't mean that it's a yes, right? You can still say no, even if your body is reacting in a certain way. And I think that's important for women to connect with, because it is confusing sometimes, right? Where we feel a certain way, but internally, and again, connecting to those centers and understanding what's coming from them and what actually is wanted, rather than just running by maybe, like the pussy and just being like, yes. When everything else is like, no.
Exactly. Yeah. So I have a story in the book. I talk about it, which is actually how I discovered my gut. So I was living in the tantric community, which praises the sex center, like listen to your pussy, right? Like there is wisdom. And I needed this because before that I hadn't done that. So it was needed for me. But then I met this guy. So he was I was getting the license for a motorcycle in Poland. He was my instructor, and just the full story is in the book. So I don't want to take too much time here, but let's just say this man was everything I would not want. And he kept making a move on me. And at one point he kissed me and my pussy got wet. And I was like, well, this is confusing. This is so confusing. And I really didn't know. I didn't know what to do. I felt so torn. And I had the voices from my tantric teachers, like give your pussy, like let her guide you, let her lead you. But there's something in my body that just kept saying, don't. And I didn't. And later I realized it was my gut telling me don't do it. And what I learned, and this was another very powerful observation for me, is that it wasn't my arousal. It was his. So because he was very fiery and he really wanted me, so his arousal, his passion was so intense that when I was in his proximity, in a way that arousal energetically was like embodying me as well. And so my body was feeling his energy, but it wasn't my arousal. And had I just followed my pussy, I would have actually ended up having sex with someone I didn't want to.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, oh, wow, okay. And so there was one of the pivotal moments for me in switching how I live my life and exactly developing the system of the 4 power centers to really, like, it was first again for myself, and then I just started teaching this to my one-on-one clients, to give women a tool. Well, like what you said, sometimes there's a part of the body that says yes and another part says no. And the thing is that we're so often in life in that space. It's not a yes, it's not a no. And as long as you, like, if part of my body says do it and a part of my body says don't, if I do it, I'm actually abusing myself because I just ignored my own boundary.
Mm-hmm.
But the other way around is also true. If a part of my body says go for it and a part of my body says don't, and I choose not to do it, I'm actually ignoring my need. So none of the options is good. And because so often, especially women, just kind of go like, oh, fine, whatever, right? It's so common for us to do that. Just who cares that I don't really feel aligned with this? Let's just do it, or let's just not do it. If you keep doing this over and over again, you're destroying your self-esteem because you keep telling yourself that, oh, what I need doesn't matter. My boundaries don't matter. And so if you start doing this in sex, you're going to block your body from being able to orgasm.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a trauma. This is trauma. And so we need to be able to work with these voices inside of us to understand, okay, so what do you need? Why do you want this? Why do you not want this to happen? Like actually have conversations with these centers to learn about yourself more so you can respect yourself more.
Mm-hmm.
So in the book, I have a lot of practices, and you guys are also going to get guided meditations together with the book to be able to do it. But this is the essence. Start talking to all of your 4 power centers to actually feel empowered in your decisions. And then it doesn't matter if a guy is going to tell you that, oh, I don't have time for 40-minute sex, because you're just going to check in with your body. It's like, yep, then it's no to sex because my body wants 40 minutes. Do what you want. It really helps us say yes and say no when we know exactly where this feeling is coming from. You won't be questioning this because you'll know exactly why you say this.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's so important to get in tune with our body because we're so disconnected from it that we don't even understand the messages that it's telling us. And sort of to your point of your story, when we get wet or we get turned on, we only hear that, right? Sometimes and not the other things, or we disregard the other things, or our mind lets us, talks us out of it. And that's a topic I get like so like passionate about, is this connection with our body, because we don't hear it, right?
Yes.
We're not connected to it. And I think it's so important in anything, but specifically with sex and relationships, and being able to, just see that this is a no. And also understanding that, like you said, that energetic exchange, like you are receiving his energy. And if we don't understand or don't have a connection with our own body, then we'll always confuse that for ours. And so, yeah, it's so powerful to be
It
able to
is.
connect in and ground in.
Honestly, I think if I was to kind of summarize my whole spiritual and healing path, the main thing is I am actually connected to myself.
Mm-hmm.
I go inwards. I hear myself, because before all the focus was outwards. And I think this is the place where we all want to get. And you can get there through many different ways. I got there through Tantra. Someone can choose another path. That's fine. But that's the place we want to be in. It's like actually have the connection with yourself.
Yeah, that's where it all is. Yeah. So how can people find your book? How can they find you? How can they work with you? Anything that you want to let them know? I'll have it all in the show notes, but if you want to just let them know as well.
Of course. So first of all, guys, you are actually lucky because this month we are celebrating 1-year anniversary of my book, which means to celebrate 1 year, we are offering the digital version for $1. So this is happening this month. So head to Amazon. Now it's available on most local Amazon stores. I know sometimes there are different regulations, so just double check, but it's available definitely on the Amazon.com, UK, etc. Kindle for $1. So enjoy this. if you prefer the physical book or an audiobook, we have this as well. And I would love to connect with you guys. If you would love to continue this conversation, I am mostly active on YouTube. You can just search for Magda Kay, and on Instagram, and it's Magda Kay Official. And basically, so there's one person online whose name is Magda Kay. She's a DJ. I'm not a DJ. So anything that's not about music, that's going to be me. So you can just go online, search for Magda Kay. You're going to find my website, all the social media, and I would love to connect. And feel free, like if you want to shoot me a message, if you're interested in working together, message me, tell me that you were listening to us talk on the podcast, so I know also where you're coming from. I really love knowing how people found this information, and I'll be happy to connect and continue the conversation.
Well, thank you so much for being here and for opening this conversation. It's been fascinating.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.